I smelled something wrong rising from that cup. Not loud. Not obvious. A sweet steam carrying a quiet note that did not belong in a Sunday kitchen. The spoon clicked against porcelain. The ceiling fan hummed. My wedding ring cast a thin circle of light on the handle as I reached for the cup Vanessa held out to me. "Mama, try my special hot chocolate," she said, smiling with all her pretty teeth and none of the warmth that makes a smile true. I froze. My heart paused, then remembered its work. The house sat gentle around us. Tony had the game turned down in the living room so I could hear the choir on my phone. His eyes on the sparrow floated like a whisper under the smell of cocoa and cinnamon. The kitchen clock ticked steady. 20 minutes is what you give a cake to set or a stew to bloom. 20 minutes can change a life. Vanessa stood close enough that I could see my face in her pupil. I saw a tired church mother who had buried a good man and kept books for a congregation that trusted her, who could smell when a number was off and when a story was bent. I lifted the cup toward my mouth and stopped again. Something pricked the back of my tongue before the first sip. Not bitterness. Not the edge you get when milk scalds. Something that told my spirit to pay attention. "Baby, have you ever smelled trouble before it called your name? Tell me where you are listening from. Tell me if your spirit ever tapped your shoulder the way mine did in that moment." Vanessa set one hand on my shoulder and the other on the cup and guided it toward my mouth like she was settling a baby. "Sip while it is hot, Mama," she said. I glanced toward the living room. Tony laughed at something on the screen and set his own mug on the coffee table before he walked down the hall. The bathroom door clicked shut. Water ran. I looked back at Vanessa. Her smile did not touch her eyes. Numbers do not lie. People do. I have said that my whole life, and I heard my own voice say it again as I lowered the cup. I set it on the counter near the sugar and the jar of cinnamon sticks. I turned to the drawer where the teaspoons live, the one that sticks unless you breathe on it, and I breathed on it and jiggled it and made a small show of searching for the pretty spoon with the pearl end. While I did that, I listened to Vanessa breathe. Even. Slow. Patient. I lifted the sugar canister and found nothing inside but sugar. I lifted the cinnamon jar and watched the red chips catch the light. I took a deep breath and set both containers down. Then I picked up the cup again. The steam rose like prayer from a choir stand. I let the steam touch my nose and watched the second hand of the clock move one tick. There is a scent a mother knows. There is also a silence a mother hears when love is not in the room. Both were speaking. Vanessa brushed a crumb off the counter that was not there. Her voice stayed gentle. "I used the good cocoa," she said. "The imported kind you like." I nodded and turned my head a little as if to hear the choir better. In that small turn I watched the living room. Tony set down the remote and stretched. His mug sat alone on the table, a twin to the cup in my hand. He never drinks hot chocolate in the afternoon. He will drink sweet tea. He will drink coffee if he must drive at night. He will drink water from the big blue plastic cup he has carried since high school. Hot chocolate is not his habit. I moved without moving. My hand carried my cup to the edge of the counter and set it near the napkins. I reached for the paper towels like I felt a spill coming. Then I walked into the living room with the towels in one hand and nothing in the other and picked up Tony's mug with my free hand the way a mother picks up a sock or a remote or a bill that needs paying. I turned and walked back into the kitchen. I set Tony's mug where mine had been and lifted my own cup like nothing had happened. I switched the cups. Vanessa watched me. I felt it in the way her words slowed. "Did you find the pearl spoon?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. I smiled. My mouth did not join the smile. The clock ticked again. I touched the ring on my finger, felt the thin ridge where the gold has worn smooth from years of washing choir robes and balancing books and laying flowers on my husband's grave. The ring warmed under the light. My hand steadied. I lifted the cup that was now Tony's and let the steam touch my face. I did not drink. Vanessa lifted her own cup and did not drink either. Her eyes stayed on my mouth while the house held breath. The air in that kitchen felt too still. Vanessa wiped a spotless counter as if waiting for something to happen. I kept my cup in one hand, pretending to cool it with slow circles. My thumb traced the rim, not to test the temperature but to buy time. When the spirit tells you to wait, you wait. Tony's laughter rolled down the hall, low and easy, the sound of a man who still believed Sunday afternoons were safe. The bathroom door clicked shut, the faucet hissed, and I heard him hum the same hymn I'd taught him when he was 8. That sound steadied me. I leaned over the counter as if searching for a napkin. My fingers brushed the edge of the mug that had been his. Still warm. Still untouched. A mother's hands remember every weight her child ever held. And I knew the difference. I lifted his mug just high enough for the light to catch the steam, then placed my own cup where his had been. Quiet. No clink, no slide. Just the whisper of porcelain against wood. I switched the cups. Vanessa's voice came behind me, soft but sharp. Everything all right, Mama Dot? Yes, baby, I said without turning. Just checking if the sugar settled right. I smiled at the napkin drawer, not at her. She stood close now. I could smell her perfume, too heavy for daytime. The kind that hides something rather than celebrates it. My skin tightened. I took one long breath and set both cups down. Tony walked back into the kitchen, drying his hands. That cocoa smells good, he said. He reached for the cup closest to him, the one that had been mine. Vanessa's shoulders relaxed so slightly that only a mother watching would notice. He took a sip, slow, appreciative, like he always did when he wanted to make his wife proud. Good stuff, baby. You might have outdone yourself. Vanessa giggled, that girlish sound she used when she wanted attention. My pulse drummed in my ears. I sat at the table, folded my hands, and stared at the small clock above the stove. The second hand moved steady, marking each moment like a metronome for what was coming. For the first 10 minutes nothing happened. Tony talked about football scores, about the new guy at the warehouse, about how the church roof still needed fixing. I nodded in the right places, but my mind stayed fixed on the clock. Then the house changed. It began with a small sound, not a groan or a gasp, but a silence between words. Tony stopped mid-sentence, blinked twice, and pressed a hand to his stomach. You all right, son? I asked. He nodded, then shook his head. Vanessa reached for him too quickly. Maybe he's just tired, she said. Her voice trembled on the word tired. Tony leaned on the counter, breathing hard. His mug slipped from his fingers, hit the tile, and rolled under the chair. His eyes blinked fast, then slower, then nothing. His body slid down, limbs jerking once, twice, then still. His eyes rolled back. I froze. Vanessa screamed his name, high and desperate. Tony, wake up. Tony, baby, please. She knelt beside him, pressing at his chest like she knew what to do. Her cries filled the kitchen until I found my voice. Call 911. I dialed. My fingers shook so bad I hit 7 before 9. I corrected it. The operator's voice sounded calm, practiced. I told her my son was down. Not breathing right, something wrong after drinking hot chocolate. She told me help was coming. Vanessa cried louder, rocking back and forth beside him. Her mascara ran but her eyes stayed dry. I had seen real tears before. These looked like performance. The sirens came 8 minutes later. They say that is fast, but it felt like a lifetime. I stood by the doorway while the paramedics rushed in, voices crisp and clipped. One kneeled beside Tony, the other unpacked instruments that beeped and blinked. What did he eat or drink today, ma'am? One asked. Hot chocolate, I said. Then I paused. Actually, he drank hot chocolate. I did not. Who prepared it? I looked at Vanessa. She was on her knees, head bowed, mumbling prayers that never found rhythm. My daughter-in-law made it. The paramedic scribbled in his notebook and nodded toward the counter. We might need samples of that, ma'am. Vanessa lifted her head. I can get the cups, she said, wiping her face. No, I told her, my voice steady now. I will handle it. She froze, then forced a smile. Of course, Mama Dot. While they lifted Tony onto the stretcher, I turned to the counter. 3 mugs stood like witnesses. Mine empty now. Tony's half-drained, a ring of brown near the rim. The third one, untouched, had a thin oily film on the surface, catching light like something unnatural. I poured what was left in each cup into separate jars I found near the sink, labeled only with my grocery list. I slipped them into my church tote and zipped it shut. The house smelled wrong now. Not like cocoa or cinnamon. Like a lye cooling down. Vanessa followed the paramedics to the ambulance, wailing Tony's name. I watched through the open door, my hands gripping the tote like a lifeline. On the ride to the hospital, I sat behind the flashing lights, every memory of my son playing in slow motion. His first baseball game. His high school graduation. His wedding day when I told Vanessa she was part of our family now. I thought of every time I'd prayed for them, and how prayers sometimes come answered in ways that break the heart open before healing it. At the emergency room, Dr. Banks met us, tall, calm, his voice low and kind. "We are stabilizing him," he said. "Can you tell me what happened?" I told him about the cocoa, about the 20 minutes, about the smell that had felt wrong. "Who prepared it?" he asked again. "My daughter-in-law." He exchanged a look with Nurse Patrice. "They wrote something on a clipboard." "We will need to run some tests," he said. Vanessa clung to my arm, sobbing. "What are we going to do if he does not make it?" I could feel the tremor in her hand, but it did not feel like grief. Felt like fear. I wanted to comfort her the way a mother does, but something in me had shifted. I pulled my arm free. "Baby, we are going to wait for truth. That is all we can do now." She blinked at me, confused by the calm in my voice. I watched her sit down, fix her hair in the reflection of the vending machine, and cry again for show. The monitors in the next room beeped steady. I prayed under my breath. Not for mercy this time, but for revelation. Show me what is hiding in plain sight, Lord. Let truth rise the way dough rises when you add heat. Nurse Patrice returned after a while. "Mrs. Whitaker, the doctor wants to keep your son overnight. We found irregular signs, nothing conclusive yet, but we are running more tests." Vanessa gasped. "What kind of signs?" Patrice hesitated. "Just signs we need to understand." She looked at me longer than at Vanessa. That was the moment I knew something deeper was wrong. A nurse's eyes will tell you more truth than her words ever can. As the night settled over the hospital parking lot, I stood beside the vending machine with my tote still zipped shut. Inside it, 3 small jars rattled softly against each other every time my hands trembled. I whispered to myself, almost a confession. 20 minutes changed my life. In the weeks before the cocoa, I kept walking past small warnings. Thanksgiving gave me the first one. Vanessa baked a pie that looked perfect. Tony ate 2 slices and smiled for her camera. By evening, he asked to lie down. She blamed the shrimp from the appetizer tray and rubbed his shoulders while I brewed ginger tea. I told myself it was a holiday stomach. I washed the pie plate and felt an ache I could not place. December brought lights and ladders. I climbed the porch ladder while Vanessa took pictures from the walk. She told me to step left. A little more left. My shoe met the edge. I laughed and climbed down. Inside, I found our cat Missy curled beneath a chair in a quiet that was not sleep. Vanessa wrinkled her nose and said raccoons had been mean in the neighborhood. I wrapped Missy in a towel and sat with her until the house went still. I told myself winter is hard on small bodies. I told myself to keep moving. In January, a bill bounced for the first time in years. The church secretary called me out of kindness. I learned Tony had opened a new account with Vanessa as the only primary. He said it was for convenience. I said I understood. I did not understand. I wrote the due amount in my notebook and paid it from my savings. I told myself a young marriage needs time to find its balance. February introduced locks. 2 drawers in their pantry carried new heavy locks with shiny keys. Vanessa laughed and said guests kept sneaking her baking chocolate. I touched the metal and felt a knot rise under my ribs. A lock in a kitchen says there is a story you have not heard. I filed the notice in the same notebook where I kept gas mileage and tithe totals. March arrived with a rich floral perfume that clung to Vanessa even at breakfast. The scent followed her down the hall and sat in the curtains. My head ached after Sunday dinners. Missy sneezed when she walked by. I took 2 pills and blamed pollen because blaming air is easier than blaming love. Tony pushed food around his plate and said work was heavy. He promised to see a doctor next week. Next week kept moving like a bus that never stops. He napped after supper in a way that did not look like rest. I watched and folded napkins and prayed for peace. At the ladies' circle, Ruth and leaned close and whispered that girl smiles without her eyes. I told her be kind. Ruth and said kindness and discernment can live in the same house. She asked if I had seen Vanessa eat her own desserts. I thought back to plates set in front of us, to the one bite, to the napkin pressed to her mouth. I laughed it off then. I did not laugh later. Ms. Thelma returned a pie plate and mentioned the pest control truck had visited 3 times in 1 month. Vanessa stepped onto the porch and called it preventive. She touched my elbow and steered me inside. She changed the subject to choir robes and Easter lilies. I let her because mothers love peace even when peace is only quiet. I wrote the dates of the trucks in the margin of my hymnal. Small things gathered like rain in a barrel. Tony woke with headaches. Tony skipped bowling night. He said passwords had changed and he did not know the new ones. He lost weight in a way that did not suit his face. He said he was fine. He said it often. The word fine began to sound like a door closing softly. In April I brought chicken soup. The kitchen gleamed and smelled like bleach. Vanessa waved a hand and said she had cleaned up a spill. The trash held 3 empty bottles lined like soldiers. I washed my hands longer than necessary. I opened a window. She shut it and said the pollen made Tony cough. I nodded because I did not yet know how to say what my spirit already knew. In May the roof fund needed signatures. I asked Tony to sign the bank letter. He said of course. A week passed. Then 2. Vanessa said he was too busy to stop by. She offered to sign for him. I told her we do not do that. She smiled like she knew a faster way to move the world. That smile followed me home and kept me up until the clock read 2. My house holds order. Pastor Brooks says peace is the presence of order, not the absence of noise. Their house began to feel like a stage. Props moved when I was not looking. The photo wall changed. The frame that held my picture from Tony's graduation disappeared. A beach trip photo took its place. Nothing else moved. I made tea and told myself families evolve. My throat felt tight while I drank. June brought a barbecue. Vanessa carried each dish to the table herself. She scolded Tony when he tried to help. She laughed loud so the neighbors could hear. She cut the cake with the precision of a woman measuring medicine. I ate half a slice and wrapped the rest in foil. At home it smelled different. I threw it out. I stood at the sink and called myself dramatic and still could not sleep. There was also the quiet business with the mail. 2 envelopes addressed to Tony appeared under a stack of catalogs. They carried an insurance company logo I did not know. Vanessa said the mailman had mixed routes and that she would handle it. Handling it meant the envelopes vanished. Later Tony asked if I had seen a letter he expected. I said no too fast. All this is to say I did not miss the red flags. I walked past them. I straightened them on the pole so they would look neat. I am a church mother. We keep peace. We believe love will make hard people soft. We pray and we wait. I waited too long. The week before the cocoa Tony stopped by my house alone. He looked thin and tired. He asked for coffee and wrapped both hands around the cup. Ma, he said, do you ever feel like your life is a set built for someone else? I asked him to tell me more. He lifted his shoulders and let them fall. It is probably nothing. Vanessa just likes things a certain way. He smiled and changed the subject. He kissed my forehead and forgot his cup on the table. I washed that cup and prayed at the sink. Lord, make me brave enough to see what I do not want to see. A week later steam rose from a Sunday cup and carried a quiet warning. It did not come with thunder. Came as a nudge. Numbers do not lie. People do. I had kept books for years. I knew the feel of a ledger that balanced only because someone hid the debt in a neat column named miscellaneous. My family ledger had too much miscellaneous in it. I was done pretending it added up. I went back through the notebook that night and put dates beside memories. I drew small squares around the moments that felt wrong and arrows toward the ones that followed. The pattern was not loud. It was patient. It moved like a tide against a dock piling, inch by inch, until the wood softens and the nails loosen. I saw how praise always came with a little pressure. I saw how gifts arrived right after rules. I saw how Tony lifted his shoulders the same way each time someone asked if he was all right. I saw my own handwriting beside the word fine far too many times. I closed the book and set it beside my Bible. I told myself the next time the warning tapped my shoulder I would listen the first time. Before bed I stood at the window and watched the street. A stray cat crossed yard and paused under porch light. I thought of photo wall, the locks. I promised myself that love would not blind me again, not even for peace, ever. The emergency room hummed like a midnight hive. Lights held the walls awake. Machines breathed for the tired and sang to the worried. I sat with my tote zipped under my chair and counted breaths. Vanessa paced in skinny heels, phone to her ear though the screen was dark. I kept my gaze on the double doors and whispered a short prayer each time they opened. Dr. Banks returned near 1. He spoke to both of us, then mostly to me. Your son is stable for now, he said. We found irregular signs that suggest exposure to something he should not have had. We will continue testing. He did not say a name. He kept his tone steady, like a bass line under a hymn. Nurse Patrice stood beside him and wrote on a clipboard. Pray and rest when you can, he said. We have also notified the proper authorities. Vanessa touched her chest. Why? Because he said, our duty is to understand how he became ill. The detectives arrived soon after. Detective Carla Freeman introduced herself with a firm handshake. Detective Darnell Hayes opened a notebook. We moved to a small family room with a couch and a low table. Who prepared the hot chocolate? Detective Freeman asked. I did, Vanessa said. I made 3 cups. Did anyone enter the kitchen while you prepared it? No. Did you drink yours? I took a sip and burned my tongue, she said. Detective Freeman turned to me. Did you drink yours, Mrs. Whitaker? No, I said. I told her I smelled something that did not belong, that I set my cup down, that I switched the cups. The pen stopped. You switched the cups, Hayes said. Yes. Without her seeing. My voice sounded calm. Calm can feel like a miracle when the heart is breaking. Any unusual events in recent months? Freeman asked. I laid a simple path. The pie that sent Tony to the couch. The new locks. The heavy perfume that stayed in the curtains. The bleach and the lined-up bottles. The changed account. The envelopes that vanished. I did not accuse. I described. The truth does not need makeup. Vanessa stared at the floor and whispered, this is ridiculous. I let it pass. Do you have anything from the house that connects to the beverage? Freeman asked. I lifted my tote and unzipped it. 3 small jars sat inside like tiny clocks. I placed them in a row and slid them across. She nodded. We will log these and proceed. After they left, the room felt colder. Vanessa laughed a small hard laugh. Mama, you are being dramatic, she said. You let gossip live rent-free in your head. I walked to the window and watched the ambulance bay glow red and white. I remembered Tony blinking, then going still. I remembered the second hand on the kitchen clock. 20 minutes. A mother can live years inside 20 minutes. Nurse Patrice returned near 2. Your son is resting, she said. We are monitoring closely. Do you need anything? I asked for water. When she left, I folded my hands and felt a clear space open where denial used to sit. I prayed like a bookkeeper. I asked for a clean audit. I asked for every hidden entry to be seen. Near dawn, Detective Freeman returned to say Tony would be admitted for observation. She thanked me for my clarity and said they would be in touch. I nodded. The tests would speak in their time. The truth had already started speaking. Tonight. I agreed to stay because she asked and because I needed the quiet of that house to speak. Vanessa set towels in the guest room and said, sleep well, Mama. I thanked her and listened to her steps fade. When her door settled, I counted slow and stood. I moved the way a nurse moves through a sleeping ward. Slow. Careful. Listening. I did not open every drawer. I opened only what called my name. Night air slipped through the small window and cooled my face. I touched my ring and asked for wisdom. Lord, help me see what matters. The house held its breath. I looked at the master door. A thin bar of light glowed under it, then went dark. She had checked once more. Sleep took her. I turned toward the kitchen and laid my hand along the wall the way I do at church when I leave the choir stand. The kitchen looked like a magazine page. Counters wiped. Jars lined with labels facing out. The room still carried a faint cocoa scent mixed with that other note that was not welcome. I stood in the center and named a truth. People who want to hide keep the obvious spotless. People who want to be known leave small honest messes. This room wanted to hide. I opened the cabinet above the stove. Spices stood like a choir in neat rows. Paprika and cinnamon sticks caught the light. Behind that tall jar a short shadow waited. I reached and touched a small container with no label and a lid that did not match. I did not open it. I set it on the counter and took a picture with my phone with the sound off. I memorized the weight of it in my palm. I put it back exactly where it had stood. I opened a lower drawer. Measuring cups nested inside each other. A kitchen scale sat with its screen wiped clear. I turned to the pantry. The first shelf held flour and sugar and cocoa in glass with hand-lettered labels. The second shelf held tea and coffee and honey. The third shelf looked ordinary until my fingers found a line of air where wood should have been. I pressed and felt a panel give a whisper, then hold. I left it be. That could wait. The sideboard drawer near the fridge slid too smooth. Inside lay a leather folder of appliance manuals. Beneath it a long thin box with a small key taped to its underside. Mothers look under things. I lifted the key. Cold metal. I opened the box. A stack of envelopes sat with the logo of an insurance company I did not know. The top page confirmed a policy purchased 2 months before. Insured Anthony Whitaker Jr. Beneficiary Vanessa Whitaker. I took a picture. Under the stack sat a folded sheet with a line for a signature. I closed the box and returned it to its exact angle. The next drawer held a small tablet. The screen woke as if it had been waiting. A draft email sat open to a contact named Probate Office. 3 short questions about timing and beneficiary updates in the event of illness. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. I did not touch a thing. I took a picture that showed no names. I shut the cover and placed it as it had been. A cabinet on the left held photo albums. Pictures tell on people. The family album looked new from little use. I opened to Christmas. Tony and Vanessa in matching sweaters. A tree that looked hired. I turned pages. Birthdays. Anniversaries. A beach weekend. My face missing. Whole chapters where a mother would usually appear and I was a ghost. The hurt rose and settled. I let it pass. In the cover pocket lay a thumb drive. I slipped it into my tote with the promise that I would return it when dawn came. Truth belongs to the living. At the sink 3 mugs sat drying. On one rim a thin dark ring marked where Coco had rested. The other 2 looked clean before they were clean. I stood still. The ring looked like time. Time leaves marks even when you scrub. I kept that thought. A floorboard sighed. I turned my head and listened. Nothing. Only a house stretching its bones. I lifted the tote and took one last look at the kitchen that wanted to be a stage. The curtain would rise soon. On the hall table a blue bowl held keys. A new cut key lay there. Edges sharp. I took a picture and did not touch it. Keys tell the truth. I told the Lord I was ready for whatever door He would open. Back in the guest room I closed the door without sound and sat on the bed. The house returned to its quiet. I set the tote under the lamp and opened the thumb drive with my old church laptop. No passwords. Folders named Family and House and Receipts. In Family I saw dozens of photos of Tony and Vanessa smiling in rooms that looked borrowed. In House I saw scans of bills and a vendor list and 3 invoices for pest control visits all in 1 month. In Receipts I saw a payment to the same insurance company from the envelopes. I closed the files. I put everything back the way it was. The house and I had spoken. It had told me enough for one night. I thanked it under my breath and lay on the bed with my shoes still on. The ceiling fan turned slow. Sleep came in pieces and left fast. I dreamed of a clock whose hands would not stop and a choir that could not finish a song. I woke before the sun. The road outside held no cars. The pines along the fence cut the sky into neat dark teeth. I stood steady. I kept watching. I would not cover this child another day. I would carry truth to people trained to hold it without dropping it. When the light came up I would already be dressed. By the time the coffee finished I would be on my way to the church lot to meet Detective Freeman. I would keep my promise to the God who had kept me all my life. Numbers do not lie. People do. Time to let the numbers speak. Dawn thinned the dark at the edge of the blinds. The house was still asleep. I walked the hall with soft steps and a firm mind. The upstairs landing held a hush like a church before service. A narrow door near the stairs opened to a small room Vanessa called her study. The light under that door was gone. I tried the knob. It gave after a nudge. Quiet hinges. The desk sat tidy. A plant in the corner looked watered yesterday. Along the wall ran white shelves with labeled boxes. Budget. Photos. House. Travel. One box on the highest shelf carried a hand-scrawled tag. Plan AJ. The letters were not neat the way her labels were. I brought a step stool from the hall closet and set it under the shelf. I climbed and lifted the box. I carried it to the desk and opened the lid. Inside lay folders divided by months. The first folder held a calendar with small notes in brown ink. Dinner with his mother. Check bank statements. Call agent. The next folder held a chart with check marks beside dates. Under a column named dosage was a list of numbers with arrows up. I did not need to read the numbers to read the plan. Said move slow until no one looks. Then move fast. A manila envelope beneath the chart held documents with the logo of the same insurance company I had seen downstairs. A letter welcomed a new policyholder. Another confirmed the beneficiary. A folded page noted a phone appointment for a beneficiary change inquiry. The time was the same hour Tony had been at work. My hand steadied. I took careful pictures. No names. Only the parts that proved a pattern. The next folder was labeled legal. Inside lay printouts of common forms. Advance directive. Power of attorney. Will template. On the back of the will template a draft list of who would receive what items. A line at the bottom read revise once funds clear. I closed my eyes and counted to 5. When I opened them I saw the truth. This was not fear. This was appetite, and my son was the lane. Another envelope held clippings. A local news piece about a sudden death in a town 2 states over. A smiling man in a photo. A short paragraph about a heart that failed without warning. In the margin a note in that same brown ink. Too slow last time. Find a cleaner method. My throat closed for a moment. I sat very still and let the feeling pass. Then I kept turning pages. At the bottom of the box lay a small notebook with a soft cover. The first page read doing what must be done. The entries did not confess. They tracked. Symptoms after dinner. He says work stress. Next week adjust. Then a line with a date that matched the barbecue day. Switch to afternoon drink. The next line read test mother. My hand tightened until my ring pressed into my finger. I set the notebook down. Some pages do not need a second reading. I took one photo of the cover and none of the inside. I closed the lid and returned the box to the high shelf. I carried the stool back to the closet. On the desk a laptop sat asleep. Press one key. The screen woke to a folder called Finances. Inside were spreadsheets named month 1 through month 6. A column labeled inflows carried amounts that matched the policy values. A column labeled exits listed boutiques and flights and spa visits. The sum at the bottom left a number that could make a young person bold. I took one picture of the file names and closed the lid. A framed photo on the wall showed Vanessa on a pier at sunset. I lifted it. Behind it a small wall safe waited. No code pad. Just a keyhole. I thought of the fresh cut key in the bowl downstairs. I did not take it. I do not steal. I do not break doors. I take truth by its hand when it steps into the light. I put the frame back. Hat boxes sat on the top shelf. Inside one I found a folder with venue brochures and 2 business cards for funeral homes. One card had a date circled in pencil. The date was last week. I did not cry. I named it. A schedule for grief that had not arrived yet. I put the card back. I said a short prayer for every man who had bought perfume for a woman who had already chosen his exit song. In the kitchen I packed the photos in my head and the pictures on my phone into the same quiet space. I made coffee. I heard the shower start. Water ran through the walls like rain in a metal gutter. I stepped onto the porch and watched first light find the shrubs. So was I. When the water stopped I returned to the table and opened my Bible to Psalms. I did not read. I let the book rest open so my hands could rest on something that had always held me. Vanessa came in wearing a robe that looked like satin. She acted surprised to see me awake. Could not sleep, I said. She poured juice and asked if there was news. I told her the doctor would call when he had it. Her face reached for concern and missed. I thanked her for the room and said I needed to pick up some things from my place. She urged me to stay. I smiled and shook my head. I will be back in a bit. She hugged me. Her hands patted my back without weight. I stepped away and picked up my tote. I walked to my car with a steady stride. I sat behind the wheel and looked at my face in the mirror. Eyes that had learned the cost of peace. I nodded once and drove to the church parking lot where I knew the morning sun would land first. Detective Freeman was already there when I pulled in. She wore a simple suit and carried a small evidence case. We spoke low by the rear bumper. I gave her the photos on my phone and the times and the places and the way the rooms had felt. I told her about the box on the high shelf. I told her about the insurance papers. I told her about the draft email and the probate questions. I told her about the note that read test mother. I told her about my son. My voice stayed even and my hands stayed steady. Freeman listened like a person who has carried too many stories and still believes in the value of one more. She placed each detail where it needed to go. Thank you for your care, Mrs. Whitaker, she said. We will move with care too. We will move with speed. We will need to visit the home today. You may want to rest at your place while we work. I nodded. I wanted to be present. I also knew when to let trained feet lead. She asked if there was anything else I had not said. I looked at the church windows catching morning light. One more thing, I said. My spirit knew before my mind did. She nodded like that was evidence too. It is, she said. It always is. I watched her drive away and sat as the sun warmed the glass. I felt the first deep breath I had been able to take in months. Not relief yet. Something quieter. The feeling that truth had finally put on her shoes. I started my engine. I headed home to shower and change and wait for the call. The day had begun, and so had the part of the story where a woman stops covering what harms her and starts covering herself in strength. I drove home through a city that was just waking. Store lights blinked on one by one. The bus hissed at the corner. I climbed my porch steps and unlocked my door with hands that finally felt like my own. The house greeted me with the clean silence of a place that has seen truth and is ready for more of it. I set my tote on the dining table, washed my face, and stood at the kitchen sink until the water ran warm. I watched the street through the window and let the old habit of covering fade like steam on glass. The phone rang before 8. Detective Freeman said their team would secure the house and speak with Vanessa. She asked me to stay available and to rest if I could. Rest sounded too kind for a morning like this, but I promised to try. I made tea and opened my ledger, not to balance numbers, but to list what I would not do anymore. I would not explain away strange smells. I would not excuse new locks in a kitchen. I would not let a smile persuade me that my hunger for peace mattered more than my son's breath. I called Pastor Brooks. His voice carried that Sunday morning calm even on a weekday. He asked what I needed. Cover me in prayer, I said. He said he would tell the prayer line to lift Tony up and to lift me too. I thanked him and felt the steadying weight of community slide into place around my shoulders like a shawl. A woman does not fight alone when she is rooted in a people. I called Miss Thelma. She answered quick like she had been waiting by the phone. You tell me where to stand, she said. I told her to keep her ears open and her door unlocked for me later. She said she would put on coffee. I smiled because that is what neighbors do when storms roll in. They turn on lights and open doors. I opened my Bible to Proverbs and let my finger land on a verse about wisdom and watchfulness. I did not search for comfort. I searched for clarity. This was not the hour for soft words. This was the hour for a spine. I wrote a short prayer on an index card and taped it to the inside of my front door. Lord, let what is hidden be brought into the day. My phone buzzed with a message from Ruth Ann. I heard. I am with you. I sent back a heart and a request for the choir to hold me in song that night. She replied with a line from a hymn that always finds my ribs. His eye is on the sparrow and I know he watches me. I closed my eyes and breathed slow. Detective Hayes called near 10 to say Tony was asking for me. I grabbed my purse and my shawl and locked the door. The hallway light flicked off behind me like the house knew it was time to move. I drove to the hospital with both hands on the wheel and both eyes on the lane. For the first time in a long time, I felt the lane belonged to me. At the hospital the air smelled like cleaner and canned soup. Nurse Patrice met me with a nod that said you are family here. She led me down the hall to Tony's room. I stood in the doorway and looked at my child. He was pale but present, the line of his mouth soft, the rise of his chest steady. I stepped beside his bed and took his hand. His fingers curled around mine like they did when he was small and afraid of thunder. I love you, I said first because love should be the first sentence and the last. He closed his eyes and a tear slid toward his hairline. Ma, he said, I need to tell you everything. I squeezed his hand and nodded. Tell me in order, baby. Start where it started for you. He took a breath that sounded like a door opening. I pulled the chair close and leaned in. I had decided hours ago. I would not cover a thing. I would hold my son while the truth did the work only truth can do. When he began, my pen was ready, my heart was ready, and the old habit of silence had no seat left at my table. Tony stared at the ceiling for a long beat like he was reading words only he could see. Started slow, he said. In the spring I felt off after dinner sometimes. Not sick, just off. I blamed the job. You know how the warehouse gets when shipments double. I nodded and told him to go on. He said Vanessa had taken over the kitchen. First it felt like a gift. She cooked more. She baked more. She packed his lunches in neat boxes with labels. He laughed once at the memory and then the laugh died. I did not mind it until I noticed I felt better on the days I ate lunch at the food truck and worse on the days I ate what was in the box. I asked if he said anything. He said he did not. He did not want to start something. He said peace felt cheaper than honesty. Then came the headaches. They rode behind his eyes and made light hurt. He started to nap on the couch and went to bed early. Vanessa told friends he worked too hard. She told him to drink more fluids and handed him sweet teas and hot drinks like a nurse who had not trained but loved the costume. He laughed again without joy and rubbed the back of his neck. "Did you see a doctor?" I asked. He said he went twice. The first time the doctor said maybe a virus. The second time he asked for tests. The doctor ordered a few and told him to come back if symptoms continued. He felt better for a week and thought maybe it was stress. Then the nausea came. He would make it halfway through supper and feel like the room was rocking on a ship. Vanessa would rub his back and tell him to lie down. She said she would handle the dishes. He did not connect the pattern. He wanted to, but he did not. He turned his head and looked at me then. "I should have told you sooner," he said. I shook my head. Guilt is heavy and does not help anyone walk. He took a breath and continued. One afternoon he felt dizzy at work and nearly dropped a box on his foot. His friend took him to urgent care. They gave him fluids and told him to rest. When he came home, Vanessa scolded him for not calling her first. She made hot chocolate to help him relax and set the mug in his hands with both of hers. That was 2 months ago. He remembered because the calendar had a heart drawn on that day. Anniversaries make people thoughtful. He said he began to pretend to eat. He broke cookies into napkins and threw them away later. He dumped drinks into the sink when she was not looking. He did not want to accuse her without proof. He did not even know what he was accusing her of. He only knew he felt worse after food and better after avoidance. I asked him when he began writing things down. He smiled a tired smile. "I learned that from you, Ma." He kept a small notebook in the garage. After each meal he wrote his symptoms, the time, and what he had eaten. He noted when he ate outside the house. Patterns began to appear like tracks after rain. He felt worse when the food was sweet and when the drink was hot. He felt better when he ate at work with the men, when he grabbed a burger or soup, when he ate my chicken on Sundays at my table. He told me he confronted Vanessa once in a soft way. He said he wanted to start eating simpler and cooking together. She cried and accused him of not appreciating her care. She said he made her feel useless. He backed down. He told himself a season of peace was worth more than a small suspicion. He said the headaches came back the next day. Then he found something by accident. He stayed home from work sick and lay on the couch. He heard the pantry door open and the click of a lock. He watched the crack under the door and saw her feet move. When she left, he went in and looked. A drawer he had never opened held bottles that did not belong in a kitchen. He did not know what they were. He shut it quick and sat back down. His hands shook all afternoon. The next day he wrote a letter to himself on the first page of the notebook. "If anything happens, this is not an accident." He wrote details he thought might help. He meant to give it to me and lost his nerve. He hid the notebook behind a box of winter decorations in the garage. He thought he had time. When he finished talking, he looked small in the bed and ashamed. I leaned forward and pressed my hand to his cheek. "You are not weak for wanting peace," I said. "You are not foolish for loving your wife. Love is not the problem. Secrecy is." He nodded and turned his face into my palm like he had as a boy. I told him about the jars and the envelopes and the folder upstairs and the plan marked with his initials. His face changed 5 times in 2 breaths. Shock, anger, grief, relief, then a clear kind of focus. He closed his eyes and shook his head. "She set the table for a meal that did not include my tomorrow," he said. I kept my voice steady. "The table has turned." Nurse Patrice stepped in and checked his vitals. She smiled at him and then at me with that quiet professional warmth that keeps families standing. When she left, I asked Tony if the notebook was still in the garage. He said it should be. I told him the detectives might find it today, and that it would help. He nodded. His eyes filled then. Not with shame. With the kind of sorrow that makes a man honest. He asked me a question that touched the place in me that still believed in miracles. "Do you think she ever loved me?" I took his hand again. I said the kindest truth I could. "I think she loved what your love could do for her. I think you gave real love anyway because that is who you are." He swallowed and turned his face to the window. Sunlight reached across the sheet like an answer to a prayer we had not known how to pray. Detective Freeman called that afternoon while I sat with Miss Thelma at her kitchen table. The room smelled like coffee and conversation. The radio murmured an old soul song. Freeman said they had served a warrant and secured the house. They had found a locked drawer and a box on an upstairs shelf. They had also collected documents that matched what I described. She said they were contacting agencies in 2 other states. The tone of her voice told me this story had highways that reached beyond our block. After we hung up, Miss Thelma poured more coffee and said to start at the beginning. I told her about the boxes, the clippings, the calendar notes, the numbers in neat columns. She listened with her elbows on the table like a woman who knows storms and keeps a map. When I finished, she shook her head and clicked her tongue. Some folks practice sweetness like others practice scales, she said. They do not sing. They perform. By evening, Detective Hayes visited my house. He carried a thin folder and the steady manner of a man who respects mothers. We sat in my living room where I keep a picture of my husband on the mantel, and a bowl of peppermints for guests. Hayes opened the folder and showed me a list of names with dates. He told me that in another state a boyfriend of Vanessa had died young with no clear cause, and that a small policy had paid out. In another city, a neighbor had fallen ill after helping her move. Nothing had been pursued at the time because grief moves people along and life is heavy and evidence cools. He spoke gently, never theatrically, letting the facts carry their own weight. He asked about Vanessa's routines. I told him what I knew. The shops she favored. The church services she attended when she wanted to be seen. The way she joined committees and then steered them. The way she offered to run errands for neighbors and always brought back their change to the penny. He wrote and nodded and asked a few more quiet questions. He thanked me for my courage and stood to go. On his way out, he paused at the doorway and said, "Sometimes those who harm learn to move like water. They take the shape of the room they enter. They flow around suspicion. But even water leaves a line on the wall when it rises. We look for that line." He tipped his head and left me with that image. I stood at the window and thought about lines only mothers notice at first. The next day the phone kept ringing. Ruthin said the ladies were praying at noon. Pastor Brooks said the church would coordinate meals for me, even if I did not feel like eating. Renee Wallace from Channel 11 left a message asking for comment. I did not return her call. This was not a story yet. It was a life. Late afternoon, Detective Freeman called again. Her voice held the firmness of someone who has finally found what she had been looking for. She said the upstairs folder contained a small notebook of track symptoms and a note about testing mother. She said the safe behind the photo held policy letters and venue brochures. She said the pantry panel concealed a small compartment with items that did not belong in a house where bread rises and children learn to stir batter. She did not name those items. She did not need to. She said this matched a wider pattern they were now mapping with help from other jurisdictions. I sat very still. The house breathed with me. The clock in my kitchen ticked a calm rhythm that had comforted me since my husband passed. I thought about how much of a life can be built on the faith that your kitchen is a place of care. I thought about women who keep homes that hold families together with nothing more than a good pan and a schedule. I thought about how betrayal chooses soft places to land because soft places are easiest to bruise. Freeman told me the next steps. An interview with Tony in the presence of counsel. A visit to the hospital from a forensic nurse to note what needed noting. Coordination with the district attorney. She asked if I had questions. I had only one. Will truth stand up under the light? She said truth is the only thing that does not fall when the light gets bright. That night I walked to my church and sat in the last pew. The sanctuary smelled like wood polish and old books. The choir rehearsed softly in the front. Ruthin lifted a hand when she saw me and then kept singing. I bowed my head and let music stitch me back together where the day had torn me thin. When the song ended, Pastor Brooks came and sat beside me. He did not ask for details. He said I was not alone and that the Lord had made me a steward of this moment. He said stewardship sometimes means standing very still while the tide changes. On the way home, the streetlights washed the sidewalk in circles of pale gold. I took my time and counted the circles like beads. At my gate, I looked up at the slice of moon near the pine. I felt tired in the way that follows a day spent telling the truth again and again. I went inside and locked my door and set my keys in the bowl. I wrote in my notebook, Today the pattern widened. Today the right people saw it. Today I did not flinch. I slept with the window cracked and the fan turning slow. In the morning I woke before the alarm to the sound of birds fussing in the tree. I listened until the voices blended into one busy song. Then I got up and made coffee and set 2 cups on the table. One for me. One for the hope that had come back to sit where fear had been living rent-free. Detective Freeman called before noon and asked me to come to the precinct. She said there would be a conversation and that I could sit behind the glass. I ironed a blouse because starch makes a woman stand up inside her bones, pinned my brooch, prayed for steadiness, and took the bus downtown. They led me to a room where truth must fight. White walls. Metal table. 2 hard chairs. A pitcher of water that tasted like a coin. On my side the light hummed. On hers the light pressed down. Vanessa sat with hands folded and hair smooth. She looked younger than she ever looked at my dinner table. She lifted her chin when the door opened. Detective Freeman entered with a thin folder, and the patience of a person who lets the river run. She greeted Vanessa and asked how she felt. Vanessa said worried sick and asked about Tony, pressing 2 fingers to her temple like grief had given her a headache. Freeman poured water and slid the cup across. Vanessa did not drink. We have some questions, Freeman said, and some documents. She placed a photograph of the upstairs box on the table, then a copy of the policy letter, then a picture of the small notebook that tracked dates and symptoms. Vanessa stared at the table as if the photographs might fly away. This is not what it looks like, Vanessa said. The policy was love. The notes were for a diet. The calendar marks were reminders to cook healthier meals. Her words wanted to sound like protection. Detective Hayes stepped in and set down a copy of a draft email to a probate office and a brochure for a venue no family chooses until there is a reason. He did not raise his voice. He let the items rest in the light. The room felt like a stage where the props had started to speak. Freeman asked where the unlabeled jar had come from. Vanessa said a friend. Which friend? She offered a name no one knew and shrugged as if friends are easy to misplace. Freeman asked about the hidden panel in the pantry. Vanessa said it came with the house and smiled as if charm could seal a gap. Charm failed. You asked a question in your notebook, Freeman said. You wrote test mother. What did that mean? Vanessa did not blink. She said it was a cooking note, taste mother, her handwriting messy when tired. She smiled again. The smile found no home. Freeman placed her last item on the table. A photo from a paper in another state. A man at a cookout. A headline about a sudden loss. Beside it a copy of a payout from a small policy that matched a name on an old account. Vanessa's shoulders dropped a fraction. Do you want your counsel? Freeman asked. Vanessa said she did. When the lawyer arrived he spoke about trauma and stress. He said my daughter-in-law had endured hardships and made errors of judgment under pressure. He said nothing proved intention. He said grief had made us see patterns where only mess lived. Freeman let him finish. She set the calendar back down and tapped the week where my son began his notes. She pointed to the day a draft email asked about beneficiary timing and to the day marked accelerate plan. She did not accuse. She narrated. Rooms change when narration takes the place of denial. Then Vanessa looked toward the glass. I saw my reflection over her shoulder. A mother behind a window. She tilted her head and opened a small half-smile that used to disarm me. Mama, she said, tell them I am not that woman. Tell them I made a mistake and I can fix it. Family should stand together. I stood, not to move but to claim air. I spoke through the intercom when Freeman nodded. I said I used to cover wrong in the name of love. I will not do that any longer. Numbers do not lie and neither does time. The clock in my kitchen told the truth last night and I am telling it today. The room grew still. Vanessa stared at me and the soft dropped out of her face. Her eyes went flat. She leaned forward and her voice changed. No tremble. No sweetness. People like you think love is a magic key, she said. Love is a tool. Mothers like you make the work easy because you believe what you are told. I never loved anyone. Love was a costume I put on to go shopping for what I wanted. That was the mask coming off. It did not shatter. It slid. It revealed a person who believed the world is a shelf and people are items to select and return. The lawyer touched her arm and told her to stop. She did not. Tell the church mother her kitchen is not a courtroom, she said. Tell her she is late to her own life. I did not answer. There are insults that fall to the floor like broken pencils. Freeman ended the interview. When the door closed, Vanessa stared at her own reflection in the glass. She did not see me. She admired the smoothness of her hair and straightened her sleeve. In the hall, Freeman said we had enough to move forward for now, and that more would come. She asked if I was all right. I said I was not all right. I said I was ready. She nodded as if those were the same thing when a woman chooses truth. I walked back into the day with my head high and my hands steady. The mask had come off. The work could begin. Outside the precinct, the sun felt honest. I stood for a breath, then whispered a promise to myself. No more covering. From now on, only light and plain speech. The courthouse smelled like paper and old wood. I wore my Sunday suit because respect is armor. Pastor Brooks walked me to the doors and prayed that the judge would see clearly and that my mouth would hold steady. Ruth and two church mothers sat behind me with tissues and peppermint. Vanessa entered with her lawyer and a calm that knows how to sit still while storms gather. She did not look at me. She fixed her gaze on the jury box. Adia Monique Fields rose for the state. She said this was not bad luck but a sequence of choices. She said she would not ask the jury to guess at feelings. She would ask them to look at records and dates in the shape of a pattern. The defense said his client had been wounded by earlier seasons of life. He said stress and fear had clouded her judgment. He said there was no proof beyond speculation. The first witnesses set the frame. Nurse Patrice described the night with calm detail. She said who had prepared the beverage according to statements and that Tony improved under care. Dr. Banks spoke about irregular signs and the duty to alert authorities. He did not offer a recipe. He spoke about duty and timing. Detective Freeman took the stand and brought the room into the house. She placed the photo of the upstairs box, the calendar pages with brown notes, the policy letters, the venue brochure, the draft email to a probate office, and the small notebook that tracked dates and symptoms. Each item entered the record and received a number. Receipts, not feelings. She narrated without heat. The calendar dates aligned with Tony's notes. A beneficiary inquiry appeared the week his headaches worsened. A line read accelerate plan. She described the pantry panel and said items were stored where food should have stood. She let silence hold the rest. The defense cross-examined. He asked if any single item proved intent. She answered that patterns speak when a life is at stake. He asked if policies are common. Yes, when both parties know and when timing is clean. He asked if notes about meals could be a diet. Yes, if they did not mirror another person's pain. He asked about other states. She read case numbers into the record. A former neighbor from 2 towns over testified by video. She spoke about a boyfriend who got sick slow and about a woman who brought him tea while she smiled for visitors. She said grief made everyone quiet then. She said she would not be quiet again. Then it was my turn. I took the oath and sat with my hands on the rail. Fields asked me to begin at the beginning. I told her about the smell that did not belong in a Sunday kitchen and about my ring catching the light. I told her about the clock and the 20 minutes. I said I switched the cups. I told her about the jars in my tote, the box on the high shelf, and the calendar with quiet marks. I told her about the draft email and the policy letter. I spoke plain because plain is strong. Fields asked what I believed. I said I believed what I had always believed. Truth rises. Lies leak. A kitchen tells on a heart. Numbers tell on a plan. I said I loved my son. I said I had once loved the woman across the room. I said I now loved my own good sense more. The defense came to pull threads. He asked about my memory. I said memory is a craft I practice. He asked if I disliked Vanessa. I said I welcomed her, and that the photo wall without me hurt only after the pattern came clear. He asked if I could be mistaken about the smell. I said a mother's spirit has a nose and the clock confirmed it. He asked if I had influenced my son. I said my son kept his own notes before anyone asked him to. Fields called Tony last. He walked slow and swore his oath with a voice that steadied. He told the jury about headaches and naps and lunches that helped only when they came from other kitchens. He told them about the day he almost dropped a box and about urgent care. He told them about pretending to eat and pouring out drinks when the house was not watching. He told them about a locked drawer and about a letter he wrote to himself on the first page of a small notebook. The defense asked if he hated his wife now. He said he did not hate anyone. He said he felt sadness like a tide and relief that sometimes outran the sadness. He said he wanted to live and he wanted his mother to live. He said he was done saying he was fine when he was not. In closing, Fields stood with her shoulders square. She said the state was not asking the jury to punish, hurt, or diagnose a soul. She asked them to match dates and choices and to weigh whether a plan had walked through a home dressed as care. She lifted the calendar page, the policy letter, the draft email, and the small notebook. Receipts do not ask for pity, she said. They ask for judgment. The defense spoke of storms that follow people who grow up without shelter. He spoke of fear that wraps around a person until they cannot breathe right. He asked for mercy and asked the jury to separate suspicion from proof. The judge gave instructions that sounded like scripture for a different kind of congregation, and sent the jury to their room with the duty to be careful. We formed a small circle by the window. We prayed for the jury and for the court. We even prayed a short prayer for the woman who had chosen a mask. Then we sat on a wooden bench and breathed. The jury took less time than people take to choose entrees at a church supper. The bailiff called us back. We stood as the jurors filed in. The foreperson handed a paper to the clerk. Guilty on the counts before the court. The judge thanked the jury and set a date for sentencing. He asked for quiet and we kept it. Vanessa did not cry. She smoothed her dress and for a heartbeat looked at me. She tilted her head as if asking if I was satisfied. Satisfaction is not what justice gives. Justice gives room to breathe. I met her eyes and then let them go. She was led out by a deputy who had carried many people through that same door. Outside, cameras waited. Renee Wallace asked if I had words for other mothers. I said this. When your spirit whispers, listen. When your nose tells you the kitchen is wrong, set the cup down and count the minutes. Write things down. Keep your own notes. Tell the truth to people trained to carry it. Then I walked away because victory does not need a parade. We gathered on the courthouse steps and stood in a patch of sun. Pastor Brooks put a hand on my shoulder and said the line I had been waiting to hear. You have been faithful over a few things. Now go home and rest. Ruthin said the choir would sing the old song on Sunday. Miss Thelma pressed a peppermint into my palm and told me to eat something cooked in a pot with a history of feeding people right. I went home and sat at my table. I laid my ring on the wood and placed the calendar page beside it. Not to gloat, to remember. 20 minutes changed a life. Records kept that truth from being buried under a smile. I wrote 3 lines in my notebook. Today justice stood up. Today truth stood taller. Tomorrow I begin the work of living again. That night the house breathed different. It did not hold its breath. It exhaled. I opened windows and let in evening air. I made tea and did not flinch at the kettle. I called Tony and we said little and that was enough. Then I turned out the lights and lay down with a prayer that sounded like thank you, and like help me keep walking in daylight. The clock ticked, not as a warning, but as a metronome for a new song we will learn to sing together. In the days that followed, a DA Fields sent word through the victim advocate that the case had turned because the community kept records and spoke up. She thanked the church mothers for their steady presence, and she thanked Tony for his careful notes. She said patterns become undeniable when ordinary people write down ordinary days with honest ink. The morning after the verdict I woke before the alarm and sat at the edge of my bed with the window cracked to let in air that moved like a clean thought. The house felt lighter. Not happy. Not yet. But honest. I made coffee and set 1 cup at my place and another on the far side of the table for the space where fear used to sit. It did not show up. I sipped and watched the light climb the cabinets like a choir rising to its feet. I took a small toolbox from the hall closet and laid it on the counter. I changed the lock on my front door. The click of the new latch sounded like a sentence I had needed to say for years. Enough. I gathered gifts that had been given to me under false light and placed them in a cardboard box for the church thrift sale. I kept things that had a true life with me. My husband's hat. The pie plate my mother gave me. A photo of Tony with frosting on his chin when he turned 5. Called Tony and we said little. How are you breathing? I asked. He said steady. He asked me the same and I said steady. We made a plan to eat supper together at my table with no talk of court and no talk of pain. Only a plate of fried catfish and greens and a slice of cornbread from a pan that has fed generations. We would eat and we would breathe and we would let the house teach our nervous systems a new song. I walked to the porch with a small trash bag, and tore up the last of the cards that had once felt like love notes. No ceremony. No rage. Just the sound of paper that will no longer take up room. I watered the mums and pinched away the brown leaves. I thought of seasons and how some plants come back when you cut away what cannot carry life. The phone rang. It was Renee Wallace from the station. She thanked me for speaking to mothers on the courthouse steps. She asked if I wanted to sit for a longer piece. I told her I would rather the focus stay on the work of community and the simple practice of writing things down. She said she would do that. She asked for one line. I gave it to her plain. Justice is a light switch. Bitterness is a blanket. I chose the switch. That afternoon Pastor Brooks stopped by with a container of stew and a short prayer. He stood on my porch and blessed the threshold. He said a home is a temple when truth keeps the keys. He told me the church would start a small group for women who needed help setting boundaries and reading bills. He said my name had come up as the person to lead it. I laughed once and wiped my eye. I told him yes. I took out my ledger and wrote a list called Ways to Live Without Bitterness. Item 1. Gratitude with teeth. Item 2. Boundaries spoken out loud. Item 3. Work that blesses others, not to earn peace but to exercise it. I taped the list inside a cabinet door and closed it with a nod. In the late afternoon I walked through each room and said goodbye to a habit. In the living room I let go of saying I am fine when I am not. In the kitchen I let go of taking the first plate so everyone else would feel safe. In the bedroom I let go of rehearsing old arguments. In the hallway I let go of apologizing for needing rest. I left each habit where it belonged. Outside, Tony came for supper with a soft smile and a small bouquet he had picked up from the market. We ate without hurry. We let the talk wander to childhood stories and little jokes that had learned to live in our family. After dishes I gave him a spare key to the new lock, and he slipped it onto his ring with a care that made me proud. When he left I stood in the doorway and watched him walk down the sidewalk with his shoulders level. Before bed I opened my notebook and wrote a page called What Justice Feels Like. It feels like a deep inhale after holding your breath underwater. It feels like the click of a new lock. It feels like a quiet kitchen where steam rising from a safe kettle does not make you flinch. It feels like choosing to bless your enemy with distance, rather than cursing them with your attention. I turned out the lights and lay on my back and let the darkness hold me. I did not bargain with the night. I did not replay testimony. I did not speak to the past. I listened to the clock tick a steady time that belonged to no one but the present. I whispered a short prayer for the woman who had worn a mask and for the girl she might have once been. Then I released them both to a court that is not mine. I slept without waking once. Morning met me with birdsong and the smell of coffee I had set to brew. I smiled at that small kindness I had given myself. The day would be full and the work ahead would be real. But the core was set. Justice. Not bitterness. That would be the instrument I tuned my life to, note by note, until the song held. The first Sunday after sentencing I sat on my porch in a blue dress and a white hat and watched the neighborhood do its slow parade. Children on scooters. Couples with grocery bags. Mr. Carter from 2 doors down walking his old beagle like a gentleman escorting a queen. The air carried the rich smell of someone's roast, and the cut grass of a yard that wanted to show its best. I had peach cobbler in the oven and a small pot of greens on a back burner that clicked calm. The church bulletin lay open to a new announcement in the lower corner. Second Chances Fund. Financial safety classes for elders. Red flag awareness meetings for anyone who needed a circle that would listen and tell the truth. I had said yes to leading because saying yes is a form of gratitude and because I knew too well the kind of silence that hides in tidy kitchens. Tony arrived with a bag of paper plates and that same shy smile he had as a boy when he brought me a dandelion and called it a flower. He looked stronger. His steps held shape. He set the bag down and lifted the lid on the pot. "Smells right," he said. We set the table together and did not rush the meal. We passed bowls and told a story about him at 7 when he had tried to make pancakes and used cornstarch instead of flour. We laughed so hard we had to put down our forks. After we ate we walked the block like we did when he was a teenager and could not find words for big feelings. We talked about weather and about the new coffee shop on the corner, and about the roof fund finally getting close to its goal. He took a breath and stopped under the shade of a pecan tree. "Ma," he said, "I started seeing a counselor." I told him I was proud of him. He said the counselor gave him a sentence to try. I can hold two truths. I loved my wife once. I am safer without her now. He said the sentence felt like a bridge. He said he walks it each morning and makes it to the other side. In the weeks that followed, the basement at church turned into a classroom and a living room and a court of gentle accountability. We opened folding tables and labeled notebooks and sharpened pencils and poured coffee that tasted like fellowship. Ms. Thelma sat near the door with a clipboard and greeted people like a deacon on usher duty. Ruth and led him softly to open the space. Pastor Brooks prayed over our work and then stepped back to let the women lead. We taught how to read a bill line by line. We practiced saying no and practiced saying not yet and practiced saying I need to check my numbers before I agree. We made a list of kitchen red flags and posted it on a cork board. Strange smells. New locks in food spaces. Heavy perfumes that linger like a fog. Sudden control of accounts by someone who did not work for that trust. We told our stories in present tense, so that the room would know we were survivors, not exhibits. I watched faces change as women heard themselves tell the truth out loud. A widow named Bernice realized she had answered every question in her home with "I am fine" for 5 years. A retired teacher named Clara said she had been embarrassed to admit she did not know her online banking, and left that night with her login written on an index card, and a plan to set new passwords with her niece. A quiet neighbor named June lifted her head when she heard Tony say a man can admit fear and still stand up straight. She went home and moved her pills to a place only she knew, and set a reminder on her phone to call her doctor in the morning. Local news did a small piece about the group. Renee Wallace came with a crew and filmed us from the back of the room while we worked through a sample budget. She asked me afterward why we called it second chances. I told her because first chances often happen in confusion and the second chance is where wisdom starts. She asked for a final line. I gave her this. When your spirit whispers, listen. Then write it down. Paper is a bridge when your feet shake. On a warm Sunday afternoon in late fall, we held a picnic behind the church. Tables under the oaks. Checkered cloths. Children running with cups of lemonade. The choir sang while families ate. Tony stood near the grill with Pastor Brooks and laughed like smoke was a hymn. Ms. Thelma told a joke that made Ruth and slapped the table and wiped tears. I turned in a slow circle and let the scene soak into me like sunlight through old stained glass. A woman I did not know walked up with her daughter. She said she had watched the news and had come to say thank you. She said the group had helped her change a small habit that had been letting big trouble into her kitchen. She pressed a folded note into my hand and walked away before I could read it. I opened it later at my table. Said this. Because of you we are eating together tonight without fear. I held the paper to my chest for a moment and then said it in my Bible. In the evening Tony and I sat on my back steps and listened to the cicadas begin their steady work. He asked if I ever thought about the house where he used to live. I said I do sometimes, and then I turned the thought into a prayer and let it go. He nodded. He said he had a box of things to sort that week. We agreed to do it together with a trash bag and a cardboard carton and the rule that nothing that lied to us gets to stay. The sky turned pink and then the kind of blue that makes porch lights look like halos. I went inside and took the cobbler out of the oven and let it rest and watched the steam lift like a blessing. I set 2 bowls on the counter and a spoon between them. Tony carried the bowls to the table and I poured milk. We ate in the quiet that belongs to people who have survived and chosen more than survival. Later I stood alone in the kitchen with the window open, and my ring turned so the stone faced my palm. I touched the edge of the sink and remembered the first day I taught my boy to wash dishes. How he had made more bubbles than plates and how proud he looked when we lined the cups on a towel to dry. I remembered the day I tasted fear on the air and set a cup down. I remembered the voice that said numbers do not lie and followed it like a path out of a fog. I spoke to the room. We made it. Not perfect. Not without scars. But upright. I thanked the God who had kept watch when I slept and who had nudged my nose and not let me ignore the nudge. I promised to keep teaching and to keep my doors open and my locks changed and my heart soft in the middle and firm at the edges. Before bed I wrote a last page for that season in my notebook. I titled it Rebirth on a Sunday afternoon. I wrote that rebirth is not fireworks. It is the way steam rises from a safe pot. It is the way a son laughs near a grill. It is the way a key turns and you know it will hold. It is the way a woman stands in her own kitchen and breathes without counting minutes first. I set down my pen and turned out the kitchen light. The clock ticked a gentle line into the dark. I walked to my room and lay down, not as a woman braced for a sound, but as a woman who trusts her house again. I closed my eyes and let the day settle. Tomorrow there would be more work. More women to meet. More notes to take. More small bridges to build. For tonight there was rest and a quiet line of gratitude that ran from my front door to the street, and then out across the neighborhood like a ribbon. And in that quiet I heard the old hymn come back soft. His eye is on the sparrow and I know he watches me.